guys, it's Topical Nate here, and today I'm going to be reacting to negative reviews of 3 of my favorite movies of 2021. But before we do that, scroll down to the description box below, pop it open, you'll find links to our social media, as well as our Ko-fi and our Patreon account, so give those things a click. We'd appreciate it. The first review is for the movie Plan B, which I loved a lot, and Karina B gave it a 1 out of 5 stars and said, I found it to be a gross example of pandering to what people assume an empowering movie for women and teenage girls would be. I was largely disappointed in the way they regarded the association of having sex and it says a personal, I think she meant a person coming of age. The characters were not ever fleshed out in meaningful ways, and this movie, for all it attempted to align itself with woke ideals, fell victim to misogynistic, fatphobic, and racist stereotypes. Very much so a common, vaguely disappointing movie for all the potential it had. Very much so not a win for women. Well, I obviously cannot speak to what is and is not a win for women or not, because I am not one. So I won't do that. As far as her being disappointed in the fact that they regarded association with having sex as a person coming of age, while I definitely don't think that has to have anything to do with a person coming of age, for a lot of people, it's a huge part of coming of age. In fact, I would probably say for the majority of people, not even just sex, but like relationships in general, which is actually what this movie is kind of about, is about friendships specifically, and also romantic relationships. Sex is just kind of what starts, is like what puts the plot in gear. So don't know what you're talking about there specifically. As far as it attempting to align itself with woke ideals, I don't think it aligns itself with woke ideals at all. In fact, that just makes you sound like you're stuck in like an era that is long gone, because the relationships that happen in this movie, whether it is like the lesbian relationship that exists in this movie, or some of the other things that happen, or the fact that they have to deal with the fact they live in a really small town that doesn't want to give a like young girl a Plan B pill, those aren't really woke ideals. They're just things that happen and exist now. And so, I mean, as far as you claiming that it falls victim to misogynistic ideas, misogynistic being things that are against women, kind of sounds like you're being that way a little bit too, and that is really, really unfortunate. So I thought this movie was great. I thought it was better than Booksmart, and I cried and thought it was really good. Next up, we have Alicia Johnson, who reviewed Last Night in Soho and gave it a rotten experience, and said Last Night in Soho reinforces biases against sex workers and people with mental illness. I really wish that she had gone more in depth, because mental illness and like learning about it is a bit of like a side passion of mine. I read a lot of books about psychology and therapy and dealing with mental illnesses. And before I ended up picking the job that I have now, I actually wanted to go to school to be a sex therapist. So I don't know what she's talking about. I really do wish that she had elaborated more. Because the sex worker that exists in this movie was forced into it. And while there is a lot of sex work that exists now that is very much so like by choice and consensual, which is good in the past and still very much so currently, a lot of it is not. And especially if you're going to talk about London in the 1960s or anywhere in the 1960s, a lot of sex work was like forced, or people were manipulated into it, which is what the story is about. And ultimately it's a story about a woman who decided to try to take that power that was taken away from her back. So the focus isn't even really on the sex work itself and how on earth it reinforces biases against people with mental illness. I really don't understand, because although I think there is a lot of allegory about mental illness in this movie, Homegirl was also experiencing an actual paranormal phenomenon, which would not be mental illness. So even though she does have one violent outburst, which I do very much so disagree with the stigma that people with mental illnesses are naturally violent, that doesn't really have anything to do with each other. So I think that she just wanted to say something and just said what she wanted to say, and it makes me question whether or not she actually watched and or if she did paid attention to the movie. And then finally we have Paul Burns, who's a top critic on Rotten Tomatoes, who gave Dune a rotten score and said, Dune is a triumph of mediocrity. What it does well enough, but was it worth doing? It's a cookie-cutter movie, a reinstatement of every trope that now impoverishes cinema. I wish that I had time to go read his full review. I don't know that I even disagree with all of those points. I just think it's sad that somehow that makes it a bad movie. Like, so many of the most beloved movies in history are still just following the same formulas that were established in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and we love them, and they're phenomenal. So as far as tropes that Dune follows, you could definitely draw, like, yeah, okay, you have like you have a chosen one character, you have a political betrayal and things like that. But I think what is important to remember about Dune is that it is derived from a novel, and they stuck a lot closer to the novel in the movie than a lot of other movies that are novel adaptations do. So not only is Dune based on a novel, it is based on one of the earliest, most successful, like, full science fiction of this, like, space type. Not discounting, like, Frankenstein or like older science fiction novels, but in terms of like these space stories, it's kind of a granddaddy. So calling Dune a cookie cutter movie when in fact Dune is kind of what we shaped the cookie cutter that Star Wars and so many other like space science fiction movies came from, doesn't really make a lot of sense, because Dune is the mold that all of these things were built from, and just because it got a movie in 2021, it's still following that same story. So that's a shit take, and that's how I feel about it. But you should let me know what you think about these down in the comment section below. Scroll back up, hit the like button, and subscribe.
It's not a game, it's a rich thing.